I've got a strip of bark in my hand right now, gray on the outside, pale green underneath, still damp from where I peeled it off a willow down by the creek. Weighs about as much as a folded dollar bill. Smells faintly bitter, almost like wet aspirin if you crush it between your fingers, which is not a coincidence. This piece of bark cost me nothing. Didn't cost the man who taught me about it anything either, but the same relief it gives you runs about $9 a bottle at the gas station now. And most folks walking past the tree it came from wouldn't know it to save their life, which once upon a time is exactly what it did. Before I go any further, I want you to know exactly what you're getting into. You clicked on this because you want the 5 plants, real ones, growing within walking distance of most everybody watching this, that a man could lean on when there's no help coming for a long while. That's what's coming. All 5, one at a time, plain and usable, so you walk away knowing exactly what to look for and what each one's good for out there. But there's more tucked inside these 5 than most folks realize. A good chunk of what's growing right here got pulled out of the woods somewhere along the way, bottled up, and sold back to you. And that didn't happen by accident. And buried in one of these 5 is a mix-up. 2 plants that look close enough to fool a man who's been doing this for years. A mistake that's still killing people who thought they knew better. That one's documented, and I'm going to walk you through the whole thing before we're done. So stay with me. Now here's something to sit with. The plant most likely to save your life isn't some rare alpine specimen you've got to hike 100 miles to find. It's more likely something you've pulled out of your own garden and thrown in the trash. Trappers and settlers pushing into high country in the early 1800s didn't carry medicine chests. A man went down with a fever 3 days from the nearest fort, and what saved him, or didn't, was whatever was growing at his feet. Infected wounds killed more of these men than grizzly bears and gunfights combined. Plain and simple, because a cut that got dirty and stayed dirty in wet wool and cold nights turned into something a man couldn't walk off. The ones who came home were, more often than not, the ones who'd been shown which weeds to press into a wound and which bark to chew when a fever set in. That knowledge wasn't superstition. It was the only pharmacy on the frontier, and it worked because it had to. That bitter compound in willow bark, the one that eases pain and knocks down a fever, chemists studied, isolated, and eventually synthesized into something new and stronger. And by the close of the 1800s, a German company had that synthetic version patented and trademarked under a brand name you've heard 1,000 times. Once that happened, the free version stopped getting talked about. Nobody's selling you willow bark. There's no margin in a man walking down to the creek and cutting his own. So the knowledge didn't vanish because it stopped working. It vanished because somebody found a way to sell you the same relief in a bottle, and a bottle is easier to advertise than a tree. That's not a conspiracy. That's just what happens to free knowledge when there's money sitting on the other side of forgetting it. And chances are, the bottle in your own medicine cabinet right now traces straight back to what's in my hand. The first plant is willow, and this is the one I'm already holding. Any man who spent real time outdoors knows the ache that sets into your joints by the 2nd or 3rd day of hard travel. Knees swollen, back locked up, a fever coming on from a cut gone bad. The inner bark of the willow, chewed slow or steeped in hot water, carries a compound that's the close cousin of what's in that bottle in your cabinet. Not the same thing exactly. Chemists took what's in this bark and turned it into something stronger and more reliable. But the raw bark works on the same basic principle, easing an ache and taking the edge off a fever. It won't hit as hard as a pill. It won't taste good either. Nobody said it would. But a man 3 days out with a fever climbing and nothing else in his kit isn't picky about either one. The second plant is cattail, and old-timers used to call it the supermarket of the swamp for good reason. Every part of it works. The root, pounded and rinsed, gives you a starchy flour that'll fill your stomach when there's nothing else. The fluffy seed head, once it's gone to down, catches a spark off flint faster than almost anything else growing wild, which matters plenty when your hands are too cold to work a lighter. and packed into a shirt or a boot. That same down insulates like nothing you're carrying in your pack. One plant, food, fire, and warmth, standing in 3 feet of water at the edge of nearly every pond in the country. The third plant is yarrow, and this is the one men reach for on the bleeding. Feathery leaves, a flat little cluster of white flowers on top, grows on roadsides and in fields most people walk past without a second look. Packed straight into a fresh cut, it's been used for centuries to help slow bleeding and keep a wound covered while it's held there. I'll be straight with you, the hard science on yarrow is thinner than the folklore, and a small number of people react to it the same way they'd react to ragweed, so it's not something to trust blind. But old-timers called it soldier's woundwork for a reason. Men on both sides of more wars than I can count carried it for exactly this. A cut that would have festered in wet wool and cold camps got packed with yarrow instead. And plenty of times, that was the difference. Now let me ask you something, because I want to hear it in the comments. How many of you have actually stopped a real cut in the field? Not a kitchen nick, a real one, with nothing but a bandana and pressure, no first aid kit in reach? Tell me what you used. I read every one of these, and I'll tell you why. The folks watching a channel like this one are the ones whose grandfather or great uncle showed them something once, off in the woods, that never made it into any book. That's the knowledge I want in the comments section, because it's disappearing faster than almost anything else we've got. The fourth plant is pine, and this one saved more lives than almost anybody realizes, because it fought something that doesn't show up fast. It creeps. Scurvy took down fur traders and explorers who could go months without a single piece of fresh produce, and pine needles, steeped into a tea, carry enough vitamin C to hold a man together through a long winter when there's nothing green for 100 miles. The inner bark, same as the willow, can be dried and ground into a flour that'll stretch a starving man's food further than he's got any right to expect. It's bitter. It's not supposed to be a meal you look forward to. It's supposed to keep you alive until you find one. The fifth plant is one you've probably killed on purpose. Plantain, not the banana, the weed, the one with the wide-ribbed leaves that pushes up through sidewalk cracks and gets torn out of front lawns without a second thought. Chewed into a rough paste and pressed onto a sting, a bite, a splinter that won't come out. Old-timers swore it took the swelling down and eased the sting. Folk medicine, not lab-proven, but generations of men trusted it enough to reach for it first. Cuts, blisters, bee stings. Plantain's been doing this job longer than any ointment you've got in your bathroom cabinet, and it's growing in the cracks of your own driveway right now, completely free, completely ignored. Now here's the mistake I promised you, and I want you sitting with this one, because it's killed people who knew more about plants than most of us ever will. There's a family of plants, the carrot family, that includes some of the best wild food a man can find, and it also includes some of the deadliest plants growing in North America. Poison hemlock and water hemlock are both in that family, and poison hemlock in particular gets mistaken for wild carrot, Queen Anne's lace, fennel, and wild parsley. Plants that look close enough at a glance that experienced foragers, men who'd been doing this for years, have made that swap and paid for it with their lives. Not careless men, confident ones. That's the part that should scare you more than ignorance ever could. A man who's done something right 99 times gets certain on the 100th, stops checking every marker, and that's exactly the moment it costs him everything. This mistake is still being made today by people with more field time than you or me, because certainty is a worse enemy out there than not knowing. Here's the whole answer laid out plain, the paradox I asked you to hold on to. The plant most likely to save your life isn't rare. It's not locked away in some botanical garden or hiding at 11,000 feet where only a handful of men have ever set foot. It's plantain, growing in a crack in your own sidewalk, something you probably pulled up and thrown away without a second thought 100 times in your life. One of the most useful things in the whole wilderness pharmacy is sitting in your front yard right now, and it costs you nothing but the 15 seconds it takes to bend down and pick it. Journals kept by men who actually lived this. Lewis and Clark's expedition records among them show native peoples along their route relying on exactly this kind of plant knowledge, willow bark and yarrow and root staples woven into daily survival, not as folk remedy, but as a standard medicine of the day. It's not campfire legend. It's written down, dated, and it held up because it worked on men whose lives depended on it holding up. I won't leave you with the idea that any of this replaces real medicine. These plants ease pain, they slow bleeding, they hold off starvation and scurvy, they don't set a broken bone, they don't cure an infection that's already gone deep into the blood. And if you take the wrong one because you were in a hurry or too sure of yourself, the same plant kingdom that can save you can just as easily kill you. This is a stopgap. It buys you time and comfort until you can get to real help, and any man who tells you different is selling you something. The men who died out there making that mistake with the hemlock, more often than not, had one thing in common: certainty. They'd done it before, they knew the family, they stopped double-checking the details that actually mattered, and confidence walked them right past the one detail that would have saved them. The ones who came home, the ones whose knowledge got passed down instead of buried with them, had a different habit entirely. They watched. They checked twice. They didn't trust a single glance at a leaf shape from 10 feet away. They got down on their knees and looked close, every time, no matter how many times they'd done it before. Watching, not talking, is what kept a man alive out there. It still is. Here's how you carry all of this. Learn willow bark first. It's the most useful and the easiest to identify. Never eat anything in the carrot family unless you can identify every feature with total confidence. That family includes some of the best wild foods and some of the deadliest plants in North America. And the mistake is usually made by people who think they already know what they're looking at. Keep plantain in the front of your mind, not the back. It's everywhere and it's free. And somebody's been quietly hoping you'd forget that while you buy the same relief in a bottle. Treat every one of these as a bridge to real help, not a replacement for it. And remember that the difference between the men who lived and the men who didn't wasn't how much they knew. It was whether they kept checking after they thought they already knew it. If this is the kind of thing that's useful to you, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that too. This channel's built entirely around the stuff that never made it into a modern survival guide, and there's a lot more of it coming. I've got something nagging at me for the next video, something about the way most people are taught to build a fire that's actually working against them the second the temperature drops below freezing. Every guide out there teaches the same layout, and there's a reason for that, and it's not because it's the best way. I'll lay the whole thing out next time. Until then, keep your fire small and stay watchful.